Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Commerce Meets Law YouTube channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, and I thoroughly hope that you enjoy it and gain a lot of value from it. This video is going to kick off a very exciting series on this channel called One Story and Three Definitions. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me explain. So, every week we're going to look at one major news story that's capturing the headlines, is all over the place, is on across all the newspapers, and has wide ranging implications on consumers, on businesses, on employers, and on sort of, society as a whole, whether it's a national or a global scale. We're then going to link it to three definitions. And every week, we're going to choose a new letter of the alphabet. So going all the way from A to Z. So, of course, for today, since it's the beginning, I'm going to choose three commercial terms, starting with the letter A, give you a brief definition of what the term means, and then apply it to the story that I'm going to include, that has kind of, been the major news story for this week, or one of the major news stories for this week. I think that it's really important sometimes, even though we can understand a term in theory or understand what it means as a plain definition, being able to apply it to real life situations is where that skill comes in and is ultimately what commercial awareness is. It's sort of being aware of the terms and then being able to apply it to the situations and sort of the stories happening around us. So hopefully this is a nice and creative and hopefully enjoyable way for you to see that. I'm going to firstly kick off with the definitions and then we'll introduce the story. So here goes. If I now look up at any point, it's because I'm looking at my laptop where I've got a few notes just to make sure that I've got all the facts and all the details correct when I explain the story and the key terms. So, the three words that I've chosen that I think link well with the story that I'm about to share with you are acquisition, administration, and assets. So, first up, acquisition. The definition of an acquisition is the purchase of one company or resources by another. It's probably a term you've heard a lot of if you've ever heard of that M&A term. It's what all the cool corporate lawyers talk about, mergers and acquisitions. This is where that word comes from. And very simply, it is just one company buying another company or buying part of the company or buying some of the assets of the company, any of those sort of terms. Which leads me on nicely to the next term, which is assets. So, again, maybe a word that you've heard before, but it is plainly property that has been owned or that is kind of has value and is owned by a particular company. Property can be tangible and assets can be tangible, or they can also be intangible. So you can have things like, your stores and your stock and all the sort of, stuff that you can physically touch, but you can also have, money in the bank. You can have IP. Increasingly, there's a lot of digital assets that we have. So all of these come under that definition that a company will have, which it can either sort of, be using or can sell later on if it wants to kind of bring down or kind of reduce its business. And finally, administration. Administration has a couple of meanings, but the one we're going to be using for today, which is probably going to give away the story I'm going to share, is a business going into administration is essentially a business that has gone bankrupt and its creditors can get in touch to try and claim any money that they are owed. So any money that they've given to the business and any money that should be coming back from the business. At this point, the business has gone bankrupt and something needs to be done with it. It needs to be restructured. It needs to be either, kind of completely taken off the market or needs to be bought by another company, and there needs to be some sort of process. So at this point, the creditors are going to step in and are going to be like, we need our money back. And that is the process of administration. I'm going to go into much more detail when I do explain this story, but for now, these are the three terms that we're going to be applying to the commercial story that I'm going to share today. You've probably heard of this story if you've been watching any sort of news, but if not, hopefully this will give you a good understanding of something that is pretty big in the UK and also has affected Europe increasingly as the story continues to develop. So the next part is the story of the Body Shop going into administration and how that has come to be. So let's have a look. Okay, so on Tuesday, so earlier this week, the Body Shop collapsed into administration less than 3 months after it was taken over by a private equity company. Private equity is a term we'll be exploring in a couple of weeks' time, called Aurelius. And this put more than 2,000 jobs at risk in the UK, as but the Body Shop had over 200 stores in the UK, along with a distribution centre and a head office. Before we look at where it is today, let's take a step back and let's see where the Body Shop sort of started and how it has come to the position that it's in today. So, going all the way back to 1976, the Body Shop was founded by Anita and Gordon Roddick to promote so called ethical consumerism, focusing on ethically produced cosmetics and skincare products. Ethical kind of products and sustainability and this sort of stuff is things that we talk a lot about today, but it wasn't necessarily talked about that much back then. So this was quite the revolution, and a gap in the market that definitely needed to be filled. So the company remained under family ownership for nearly 3 decades, so 30 years, until they sold it to the French Cosmetics Corporation, L'Oreal, again, a name you've probably heard, who also own brands such as Maybelline and Garnier, for 652 million in 2006. Now, by then, the Body Shop was known for its ethical positions, things like, refusing to stock products that were tested on animals and using natural ingredients in all of its products. So the decision to sell it to a global commercial, sort of big corporation did disappoint a lot of its loyal customers who had sort of, really kind of had that connection and that, kind of they aligned with the values of the brand, and cleared the way for rivals like Lush, like Neal's Yard and Aesop to all step in. So the Body Shop sales and profit began to flag at this point, and L'Oreal, as the corporation it is, decided that it was time to sell it off, and they sold it to Brazil's Natura, which seemed like a more, natural fit for the owner, because they also owned the Australian natural beauty brand Aesop. Now, a couple of years later, Natra actually decided that it wanted to focus on its core Latin America market and clear some of its debts. Something that companies, they do tend to review their assets and see which ones are making money and which ones aren't. It's quite an important part. So they decided to sell Aesop and the Body Shop, and this is when Aurelius, which is the company that currently owns Body Shop, and it is about to sort of put it to administration, comes in. It was one of the few bidders, and Aurelius is a German company. It bought the Body Shop last November, so really not that long ago, for £207 million, and has now appointed the accounting firm FRP Advisory due to concerns with the future of the business. Okay, so we're thinking, what's happened? So last month, Aurelius closed down the direct sales business, the Body Shop at Home, and sold off its stores in Europe and parts of Asia, both of which were loss making. In terms of UK business, the UK business recorded a loss before tax of 71 million in 2022 on sales of 407, compared with 10 million of profit the previous year, according to its most recent UK filings. And there was about 2,500 staff during that year. Now, obviously, the administrators who have come in have said that they want to kind of restructure the Body Shop, especially its UK business, and want to find the best means of securing the future of the Body Shop and revitalizing its iconic British brand. Now, Aurelius might actually be interested in a honed down version of the business, so one with less stores. But there is also interest from bidders such as Next. Now, this is where the sort of, extra or, larger commercial awareness comes in, because we've seen that Next have acquired brands like Kat Kidston and Fatface, which is now stocked both in its high street stores and online. As there is this continued rivalry of shops coming up online versus the brick and mortar stores, we have seen Next and a lot of brands like it acquire a lot of these smaller brands and put it into both its online and sort of, in store kind of filings that it does offer. Now, one beauty industry expert, and this was sort of on the Guardian website, all of the websites used for this video will be linked down below, said that the Body Shop was not a brand that could work as a wholesale collection on other retailers' shelf and would need a chain to ensure that its ethical sourcing was properly communicated. Now, the problem with this is that it probably suggests that storing it in, your local drugstore is probably not enough and it needs those separate stores. But obviously running these separate stores cost money, and particularly where there is reduced footfall, post pandemic, and also now that there's more online offerings, there's also more competition in the market. It doesn't surprise that the Body Shop, has kind of lost its charm that it had all the way back in 1976. One important detail, which I thought was actually really interesting, was that Aurelius has a security over a part of the Body Shop's debt, making Aurelius a creditor as well as an owner of the business. This means that this gives the firm leverage and influence over the insolvency process. Now, what does that mean? That essentially means that as a creditor, the Aurelius actually has security over the debt, therefore, that it is actually owed money once or if the Body Shop does go into that insolvency process. So, as well as being an owner, it is also owed money. So, in a way, Aurelius has that security of getting back the money that sort of was lost in terms of profit when the Body Shop was recording much lower sales last year. And this also means that the administrator, so the FRP advisory, ends up cutting costs by closing shops and making people redundant. As we've explored, a lot of jobs are at risk. Renegotiating those contracts with landlords, so the brick and mortar stores that we have, where are those leases, what are those prices, what's happening with that, and then may just hand the business back to Aurelius. So it's very interesting because I think we think that, it's going to come in and it's going to go on to a new one, but that's not always true. Aurelius may just take back the business, albeit in a much more sort of honed down version and possibly a different one or restructured one compared to what we have now. And as I sort of explained at the start, the current sort of development, and the story is developing day by day, is that the German arm has also gone to administration, and it is likely that Belgium is going to be next. So that also means more jobs at risk and also more customers that possibly want to, kind of take up all the stock before the stores around them close down. Now, I think that this story, where these three terms have come in, is of course it's gone into administration. It's had to sell off a lot of its assets. That includes all the stores and all the kind of the products and also the IP attached to it, whatever kind of tends to happen with the business. And of course, that final sort of when we are looking at this story, we have to look at it from various different angles. So of course, there's been acquisition multiple times in this story, but the Body Shop is a brand that we know as the Body Shop. Actually, until these kind of things come up, no one really questions who it's owned by, whether it's PE, is it under family ownership. This stuff tends to come out, and we kind of start to consider it once we have actually seen the whole process go from start to finish. So I think that in terms of implications, it's of course gonna, it impacts employees and employers, particularly in the UK now, and we'll see that happening across Europe as well. But the other implication is also what that means for brands like the Body Shop, those that were cultural and ethical revolutions back in the 80s. What does that mean for today when there is a lot more competition and, the online market is picking up? So I think that it's really interesting to see that from both a branding perspective, from, sort of a profit perspective, and also what happens when it goes from a family-owned company, a small company, into the hands of a global corporation and then a PE firm who ultimately don't have that necessary sentiment attached to it, but are looking for how best they can restructure in order to make as much profit as possible. So I think that this is a really interesting story, and the Body Shop is something that I've really enjoyed buying from, and it's one of my favorite brands. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen next to it, and is it going to follow a lot of current companies that have gone to administration, and possibly is it interesting to think about whether more companies in the future, or in the near future really, with the UK going into recession as of last year, as the news has indicated, what that means for other firms in the UK and in Europe in general. So I hope that this has been interesting, and I hope that you've sort of been able to gain a sense of the story and also how these different terms kind of fit into it. And I hope that this encourages you to go and read up about the story yourself. As I said, all the links will be down below, and look and find for some more terms that you think would fit into this story. And with that, thank you so much for watching this video. I thoroughly hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you're excited for the rest of the series. Please let me know any feedback that you have in terms of any of the explanations, the story itself, what kind of stories you want me to talk about, what terms you want me to pick. If you had to pick 3 terms, the letter A related to the commercial world, what would you choose? Let me know. I'd be, very excited to get a conversation started in the comments down below. But for now, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon in the next video. Bye.